Russian military convoy exploded in anti-tank missile fire by troops from Ukraine's 72nd Brigade. Vladimir Putin's latest attempt to seize land in Ukraine was stopped in its tracks after Ukrainian forces blew up several Russian tanks in a devastating ambush. Multiple Russian armored vehicles were blown up in a series of devastating Ukrainian strikes as Vladimir Putin continues to struggle to make gains in his war. Ukraine's armed forces released footage of the precision strikes which used anti-tank guided missiles to obliterate several Russian tanks trying to make advances in the Donetsk region. Forces from Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade targeted the Russian tanks south of the city of Pavlivka in a humiliating failure for President Putin's men. At least 4 tanks were filmed being wiped out during the ambush. A separate clip from the same strikes saw a Russian BMP-3 tank become engulfed in flames as it rushed to make it to a tree line in its advance. Clips showed several burning tanks which had littered the front line in Pavlivka after Russian troops were forced to retreat. Despite throwing tanks and men at the battle to take Pavlivka, current reports suggest Russian forces have yet to enter the city itself, with most of the fighting still stuck on the outskirts. The armed forces of Ukraine later confirmed that it had repelled several Russian attacks across 11 settlements in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions on Thursday. The push coincided with a massive barrage of Russian missile attacks across Ukraine, which killed at least 11 people. However, much to President Putin's frustration, all Russian kamikaze drones were shot down while 47 of the 70 rockets were also downed. The latest stalled offensive comes just days after Russian armed forces declared that it had launched a new push in the Zaporizhia region. Despite the claim, the Ukrainian soldiers insist that the front line has remained frozen. Today, Ukraine's army claims to have killed 109 Russian soldiers and wounded a further 188 in one day's battle around the village of Volodar in the eastern Donetsk Oblast. Serhiy Cherevadii, a spokesperson for the Eastern Operational Command of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, said the bloody death toll was recorded on Thursday. It is widely understood that President Putin is preparing to launch a fresh offensive in Ukraine in the spring or early summer. An assessment from the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, one of the world's leading military think tanks, claimed that Russian troops are regrouping in preparation for a big offensive in the eastern Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. The expected offensive in the spring prompted Western countries to supply Ukraine with much-needed tanks. Earlier this week, the U.S. announced plans to send 31 powerful battle tanks to Ukraine, joining Germany in sending the vehicles to support the fight against Russia's invasion. The decision to deliver the M1 Abrams tanks was announced just hours after Germany said it would send 14 of its Leopard 2 tanks to the battlefield. This morning, Poland announced that it will send additional 60 tanks to Ukraine on top of the 14 German-made Leopard 2 tanks it has already pledged. Ukraine has long claimed that the tanks could help deter a potential Russian offensive. Meanwhile, President Putin's spokesman condemned the moves as a blatant provocation. They said any supplied tanks would be destroyed, adding, "These tanks burn like all the rest. They are just very expensive." Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters the plan was a failure in terms of technological aspects, as well as a clear overestimation of the potential that this will add to the armed forces of Ukraine, state news agency TASS reported. Meanwhile, some Russian military bloggers have tried to reassure their domestic audiences by saying previous Western systems like HIMARS posed more of a threat, having previously framed the defensive Patriot missile systems as a serious escalation. The fact that the tank provision wasn't framed as escalatory suggests that the Kremlin and the Russian information space continue to selectively choose which systems to frame as an escalation, the ISW said on Wednesday. This showed that the Kremlin and Mil bloggers are more focused on calming potential fears of the impact of Western commitments to supply Ukraine with tanks than with feeding the escalation narrative in the West. Russian newspapers have also compared Berlin's decision to supply the tanks with the World War II conflict fighting Nazi aggression. One headline in the mass circulation tabloid Moskovsky Komsomolets said, "German tanks are again moving across on Russian soil," and a piece that said these supplies will not save Ukraine. An article in the government newspaper Rossiyskaya Gazeta, a publication that reflects Kremlin thinking, suggested that Russian forces could handle the tanks. Yen Gadjin, a military advisor to the self-declared Donetsk People's Republic in Ukraine, said the tanks will not be able to fight on their own without proper cover and that we have enough weapons such as artillery shells, drones, and grenade launchers to target the vehicles. In a Twitter thread on Thursday, military analyst Rob Lee said that NATO tanks are not a silver bullet and that if the alliance wants to help Kyiv retake all of its territory, it will need to give other systems like fighters and ATACMS to improve Ukraine's combined arms capabilities even more. Tanks will undoubtedly play a key role in Ukraine's future offensives, as in Kharkiv and Kherson, he wrote. The new tanks will increase Kyiv's chances for success, but not guarantee it. Washington and Berlin's compromise is aimed at preventing a rift in the NATO alliance, which would have encouraged Moscow to believe it could win by exhausting the West's will to support Ukraine. Bibi said the pressure Berlin faced to provide the tanks shows the divide over how to end the war, with Germany and France doubting that Ukraine can win unconditionally, while the risk of escalation into a direct Russian NATO are significant.